Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about an almost lost hobby of 18th century knotting. Grab a bit of thread, add a cup of tea perhaps, and let's start. If you've looked at 18th century portraits, I'm sure you've seen ladies holding this bit of shuttle and thread thing, and they're just there very elegantly posing for their portrait. What is this? What was this? This was called knotting, and it was a very fashionable hobby for ladies of the upper class in the 18th century. It was basically something for them to do while they were with their friends, while they were in long evenings and they didn't have enough light to maybe embroider, and something to do while you were in a very long carriage trip. It's basically thread wound into a very large shuttle, and little knots are being made, like so, right next to each other in little clusters to form textures. And all these little knots would be collected into a little drawstring bag that was usually very decorative in itself, and the action of the shuttle and the hands was said to be very elegant and very alluring, sort of like a fan. These meters of knotted thread were later made into fringe for household items or couched it on in their embroidery. If they were made out of linen, it was for household. If they were made out of silk, they would be for clothing and to actually decorate their little knotted bags as well. The shuttles were unto themselves fashion accessories. They were made out of precious metals, gold, silver. I made mine out of silver, tortoiseshell, ivory, porcelain, enameled metal, and mother of pearl. Some of them were much simpler, perhaps out of steel, but still very, very decorative. 18th century shuttles are much larger compared to 19th century tatting shuttles because they were made to hold more thread. Maybe the thread was thicker as well, as opposed to tatting thread. If you don't have one of these laying around, not even a tatting shuttle, you could simply use a spool of thread to get started. What fascinates me about knotting, aside from the fact that the shuttles are very beautiful, is that we don't really know why we stopped doing it. Why did we stop knotting? When did we start tatting? How are these two related? I did find in a text from the 19th century they're both being used together, but we don't really know much else, and why did we drop it altogether? The amazing Bryce Addams has made a wonderful YouTube video where she recreated a piece of tatted lace found in a portrait from the 18th century. The lady shuttle is also smaller. She's clearly tatting. There's no little knots involved. And it blew my mind, and it inspired me to make this video since there's so little information about knotting on the internet. I also found Italian knotted fringes, which they incorporate into their whitework embroidery. They're very, very interesting because in structure they sort of also relate to 18th century fly fringe, but they're made out of cotton, and it's really interesting to see how different cultures and different nations sort of end up using and adapting the same technique for different purposes. In my research, I did find 7 different knots, all variations of the same thing. All the text and pages that I mentioned and a bit more information are all linked in the description down below, so do check it out. Anyway, enough talking, let's get started. The first note I found is from L'Art du Brodeur by Monsieur Saint-Aubin, written in 1770. He calls it a single overhand knot and describes it as knots that ladies make while having fun. He gives no instructions whatsoever, so I'm holding my thread and shuttle as I would if I were tatting, passing my finger between my index and middle finger. After a few knots, the thread tends to twist, and I wonder how they would have dealt with that once the thread had collected inside their work bags. I simply let the thread hang as to let it untwist. In the same plate, he describes double-sided shuttle knots. While looking up the art of the embroiderer, I found a knotting tutorial over a Quantrielle's Life that explains the knot as being 2 overhand knots slightly separated and interlaced by a third knot. So we're doing the same knots that we did at the very beginning, and here we have to be careful to catch the second knot and that the thread runs between the 2 knots so that they lay flat. The thread tends to twist, so try to help it with your other hand. In Quantrielle Life, I also found Mary Delany's Sugar Plum Knot. Mrs. Delany was an 18th century artist and, amongst other things, an avid needleworker, famous in the court of George III, so much so that the king gifted her a gold knotting shuttle. This knot consists of an overhand knot and then another enclosing it. So here we just have to take care to grab the first knot that we did to complete the knot. In a letter to a Lady Hamilton, she writes, "I am at this time knotting white silk to fringe the bag which is to contain it, supporting the evidence that silk thread was used for clothing and accessories, whereas linen was used for household items." The earliest mention of knotting in the 19th century that I have found in English is in a tatting book from 1868, written by Mademoiselle Riego, called The Complete Tatting Book. She gives us these instructions. Fill the shuttle, commence a loop as in tatting, and after placing the cotton between the finger and thumb of the left hand, pass the right hand with the shuttle to the back of the left one, and put the shuttle into the loop from the back to the front. Then pass the shuttle to the back and through the loop again to the front. Do this a 3rd time. Then, holding these twists of cotton between the finger and thumb of the left hand to prevent their slipping, draw the loop close with the right hand. This finishes 1 knot. For a 2nd knot, commence the loop close to the last knot and repeat until the right numbers of knots are made. I really like this knot. It reminds me of a bullion knot. It reminds me of one of my father's fishing knots as well, and it's very attractive and easy to make. The next knot I named Dillmont's large double knot. It is made of 4 single knots next to each other, interlaced by a 5th knot. It's found in the Encyclopedia of Needlework by Thérèse Dillmont in a later edition. It shows a knotted ball fringe in its needlework trimming section, and it also describes a small knot, which is the simple single overhand knot as shown in the beginning of the video. With this knot, we really have to be careful to catch all the 4 little knots, and they form a very pleasing little cluster. Again, as the thread twists, we have to arrange it with our other hand. It tends to want to make the knot wherever it wants and not where we want it to. The newest source I have is from a magazine, the Dimanches de la Femme, circa 1923, and it calls the technique soutage noué. It would be like knotted soutage, and it shows 2 knots. In figure 4-5, a similar knot to Mademoiselle Riego's knot, only going through twice instead of 3 times before closing the knot. And the next, on figure 9, shows 3 consecutive overhand knots interlaced by a 4th knot, similar to the one mentioned by Mrs. Dilmont. So that's it for the knot. I divided the video in 2 parts, otherwise this one would have been a bit lengthy. On the next video I will show you how to apply your knotted threads into a design inspired by Mrs. Delany. I hope you've enjoyed the video and learned something new about an almost forgotten hobby, knotting. I encourage you to give it a try. It's something very productive to do while being with friends having tea or perhaps watching a movie, as it doesn't require much concentration as perhaps knitting. You won't lose any stitches there. Don't hesitate to leave your comments and questions down below, and perhaps you would like to know more about Mrs. Delany. I could talk about her. If you decide to give it a go, please tag me on Instagram at Antique Needlework so that I can see and share your beautiful work. Please subscribe, click on the bell, and if you would like to see more of my content, please follow me on Instagram, where I share some of my personal projects as well as information I find during my research. See you next time!